Hello, boys and girls. So this week we're going to try to do two packets. We're going to do lesson 2, History of Africa, and lesson 3, Life in South Africa. So I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible. That way it's not too long. So let's go ahead and look at this here. So we already know these are vocabulary words. We'll go over them as we go along. And these right here where it says, when did it happen? These are just important dates we should look over. All right. And they should come out in the story as we read along. So here it says Rise of a Kingdom. And it asks us to highlight the trade goods that originated in the region's interior. So when it means the trade goods, things that they would trade. All right, so let's try to read along real quick. So it says, South Africa's indigenous people have lived in the region for thousands of years. Some lived as hunter-gatherers. So remember, hunter-gatherers are people that hunt and gather food. Others farmed and herd cattle. Trade amongst these groups flourished. Ivory, gold, copper, and other good things moved forward, or moved from the interior to the East Coast. So it says here, highlight the trade goods that originated. So it's asking us to look for things that were traded, and we just read some right now. It said traded among these groups flourished, and it talks about ivory, gold, copper, and other goods. So that's our first answer. All right, so we got that one pretty quick. So let's go on to the next one. It says describe the history of the Matupa Empire, or Mutapa Empire. So let's read a little bit. So it says around 900, the Shanoa people built a wealthy and powerful kingdom known as Zimbawa. This one right here. So let's try to look for this word here. So it comes out right here. So I don't think we really had to read anything from here, so let's not worry about that. So it says, in the late 1400s, the Shannon conquered the region between Zimbabwe and Limpopo River. Okay, let's keep reading. So it says, this empire traded goods, or gold for goods, from China and India. In the 1500s, the Portuguese arrived and took over the coastal territory. In the 1600s, the Mutapa king allied with this kingdom here to drive the Portuguese out. Okay, were conquered by the Martin territory and ruled it to the end. So this group conquered them as well, and they ruled until the 18th century. It then became part of the Zulu Empire in what is now known as South Africa. So, here's what we can write about these guys. All right, so this is one thing I noticed, is that they were conquered by the Portuguese, they kicked them out, and then they were conquered again by the Zulu Empire, or this empire right here. So something that we can write here is that this empire was always getting conquered. So we can write that down here. So conquered by the Portuguese. In the 1500s. And then we're going to write this one right here. So 1500s. Then by, we're going to write this word here. Let me make that nicer. So they conquered them in the 1600s. I know. In the 1800s. Okay, so that's one form of history that we can describe. You can put something else, but that's something I wanted to put there. Okay. And as long as it has to do with anything from here, it's going to be correct, okay? So just make sure it's from this section here. Okay, let's see. Read the text on the right. Highlight the names of the rulers who formed the Zulu Empire. So Zulu. So the leader of the Zulu... So the Zulu leader, Shakira united his people in the 1800s to form the Zulu Empire. So there's one. It was killed. The empire survived until the British destroyed it in the Zulu War. Okay, so before I go any further, let me actually show you what this looks like. So the Zulu Empire. Search it on the web. So the Zulu Empire was based off in Africa. Okay, and they were around these areas down here. Okay, now they actually did fight the British and they put up a really good fight. Let me show you what a Zulu warrior looks like real fast. So these were Zulu warriors, part of the Zulu Empire. They had shields, spears, they even had swords. Their swords were made out of trees. Even their women were a part of the Zulu warrior or army. Okay, so they had a very big part in history. Why? Because they were very powerful in that section of Africa, but also they actually put up a very big fight against the British during the Zulu War of the 1879. So yeah, let's continue. Which outsiders traded with the Southern Africa before the Europeans arrived? So let's see, this does not really say much. It just shows the different kingdoms. So there was this kingdom here. We just talked about that one. This one, and the last kingdom was the Zulu Empire. These were the years that they were established. So just look at that. That way you know what, if that ever comes out in anything that about Africa, if we ever take a test. I doubt we will, but it should be something you know. Okay, so like I said, let's go back over here. So it just asks which outsiders traded with the Southern Africans before the Europeans arrived. So let's see, a series of kingdoms rose and fell on the Madagascar from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. Some of the early kingdoms were influenced by Arab and Muslim cultures. In the 1800s, one king allied with the British to keep the French from taking control of Madagascar. He conquered most of the islands and formed the Kingdom of Madagascar. French troops invaded Madagascar in the 1895 and made it a French possession. So which outsiders? Here I would say it would be the Muslims and the Arabics, because the Muslims and the Arabics, they didn't take over, they just came in, but they weren't conquering territory. So here we're going to put Arabic and Muslims. And like I said, I say that because the Arab and the Muslims, it's a culture of people, but they came down from the Middle East down to Africa, but they didn't conquer territories. They just spread their religion and their beliefs. Okay, so what is the purpose of Portugal's first settlement in Africa? So let's read here. Okay, so here it talks about Portugal. Okay, European colonies. Remember European colonies. So remember Europe. is mostly all these countries over here. Okay, so everything you see in red is most of Europe. Portugal is a part of those countries. Let's look up Portugal. Here's Portugal. It's right next to Spain. Just it's kind of hard to see on the map because it's a little bit tiny. So it says here, what was the purpose of Portugal's first settlement? So here it says, in the 1500s, Portugal's and other countries started settling along the African coast. At first, these were trading posts and supply stations, which ships could stop and on their way and go to Asia. So it's kind of like just like a gas or a pit stop for them. But this doesn't explain why Portugal's settlement, or maybe it does. Let's keep reading. Eventually, Europeans grew interested in exploiting the region's natural resources. Let's see. So the purpose of it was to have a trading post, okay? So here we're going to put, and also let's go ahead and put that. Having a trading post and exploit the region's natural resources. So let me zoom in. So that's what we're going to put here, to have a trading post. So to have a trading post and to exploit the region's natural resources. Those are your few good answers for that. Okay, so let's move on. Now, if you need to go back, just rewind, okay? Or just pause and just copy, okay? Let's look over here. Number 6. Read the text on the left. Underline the sentence that explains who the Boros were. So the Boros. Let's look at the first paragraph here. So here it talks about the Dutch founded Cape Cove, or the Cape Colony, sorry, and on Cape of Good Hope, at the southern tip of what is known as Southern Africa, the Dutch became known as the Boros. So these people are Dutch, okay? And Dutch, let's look up what the Dutch look like. Real quick. So that's a country where they come from. And these are the people, basically. All right, so that's going to be our answer, is the Dutch. So let's underline that. Okay, and if you don't have the packet, just write your answers on a sheet of paper or on the Google form I have for you. All right, and when we're done with this, all you got to do is just, if you have the packet, take pictures of it and send it in. If not, just type it out on the Google form that I am going to show you. All right. Okay, sequencing. Briefly describe Dutch and British attempts to control what is now Southern Africa. So let's see. So the war in Europe gave the British control of the Cape Colony on the early 1800s. Thousands of British settlers soon arrived. To the Boros' resilience, the British ruled. Beginning in the 1830s, thousands of migrated north of Orange River to the Great Trick. Boers. Okay, in the 1886, they found the world's largest gold deposit. The British wanted control of the resources, which led to the Boer War. In the 1899, the Boers were defeated and again came under British control. In the 1810s, British allowed the Boers colonies to join the Cape Colony. They formed the island or independent Union of Southern Africa. Britain maintained control of these two countries. Okay. Other European countries had been competing over the rest of Africa. In the 1884, representatives of the countries met in Berlin, Germany, to divide the countries among themselves. The chart below shows how the colonies, or how they divided the Southern Africas. So, okay, the European colonies in Southern Africa. So here is the different European countries. These are the countries of Africa. So they divided. So let's see, briefly describe Dutch and British attempts to control what is now Southern Africa. Well, the British and so what we've read basically is that the Dutch, which were these people here, and the British were always fighting and going to war. So that's what we could put. And forgive me, I'm writing on an Apple Pen. I'm not really used to doing that, so it might come out a little weird. See what I mean? So basically the Dutch and the French were always, or not the French, the British were always fighting over territory because they knew the land had some useful resources that they could make money off of, such as gold, iron, any kind of minerals. So here we're just going to put the Dutch and the British were always fighting for control. Okay, so here it says, name 5 present-day countries in South Africa that were once controlled by the British. Let's see. Well, Madagascar is still a country. We can write that. So Madagascar, you can put over here. A lot of these are still countries, except for this one. So you can choose any of these here and write them here. You only need 5. Okay, so remember, just 5 present-day countries in Southern Africa. Okay, so just choose any of these, put them over here, okay? The only one that's not a country anymore is this one, because it was seized by South Africa, like South Africa, the country. Okay, let's continue. We're almost done. Which European country claimed the most territory in Southern Africa in the 1800s? So let's see. The 1800s. Well, actually, we'll just look over here. So it would just be the British, because if you see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 countries here. Portugal only has 2, Germany only had 1, and the French only had 2. So the answer would be Britain. Like, if we look back in history, the British almost controlled the entire world, guys. I mean, they controlled the American colonies, they controlled almost all of Africa, and they even had control of Asia and parts of China, which we'll try to learn before the school year ends. Hopefully, I can make it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, like I said, the British controlled almost everything back in the 18th century, I guess, and even before that. Okay, let's move on to here. So it says, read the text on the right, highlight the names of the two Africans who became president of their countries after having been leaders of revolts against the white rule. So basically, white people, when they say the right white rule, and they want to know which two guys became president. So let's read it a little bit. Rebel groups of each country fought for control until the 1994. That was not that long ago. I was born in 1992, so that's wow. This country right here in 2000, and this country right here. So white leaders in British Southern formed the country of Rhodesia. Have a hard time saying that word. The countries of Africa population carried on a guerrilla warfare. So guerrilla warfare, let me show you what that looks like. Let's look that up real quick. So guerrilla warfare is this here. So it's basically like citizens, or not citizens, but people themselves that are not in the army getting together to fight against a major power. So like in Africa, the British were in charge. So the African citizens, or the people that were living in Africa, bared arms. Basically, they got a bunch of weapons and started fighting off the British to get them out of Africa because they didn't want to be controlled by the British anymore. So yeah, let's continue. Okay, so here, let's read right here. It says in 1970, formed rebel leader Robert was elected president. So this is our first answer. So this is one of the people that he was a rebel leader, and he was since he was successful in kicking out the British from his country, he was able to become the president of this country right here. Okay, so let's continue. So it says the white minority government of Southern Africa stayed in power by limiting the black population's rights. So basically they controlled the African people, or the black people from Africa, by not allowing them to do certain things like vote or have an education or stuff like that. So that probably got a lot of people upset, and that's why, they had their wars going on. Let's continue because we still got to find the other person's name. So the English controlled the government until the end of World War II. Then a strike became more than 6,000 black mine workers fighting the white population. In 1848, they elected an Afrikaner government that promised to take action. Okay, the government created, let's see. All right, so the government created a system of this right here. Let's look back at what that means. So apartheid, a system of laws in South Africa aimed at separating the races. So that doesn't sound like a good thing, because they want to separate people, which isn't really something that you want to do. Okay, so the laws forced black Southern Africans to live in an area called homelands. So basically what they're doing with this is they're separating black people from the land that they lived in and forcing them to live somewhere else. So the African National Congress began a campaign called the Civil Disobedience. Okay, so civil disobedience means disobeying central laws as meaning for protest. Armed conflict soon erupted in the 1862. Later, Nelson Mandela was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Okay, so other countries took note of the events. In South Africa, some began to place embargoes. So an embargo, let's look up over here. So an embargo is a ban on trade with a particular country. So that means that if they're creating iPhones or iPods and they want to sell them to the US, if the US puts an embargo on Africa, well, then they're not going to buy from Africa. They're going to refuse. Now, the reason they put an embargo was because they were doing this here. They were separating black people from their home country, forcing them to live somewhere else. They weren't giving them their civil rights. And also they put this man here, Nelson Mandela, in jail. And he didn't really do anything. He was just trying to fight for people's equal rights in Africa. So a lot of countries took note of that and they put an embargo on South Africa. So then in the 1989, the president was forced to resign. The following years, his successor began to repeal the laws. Mandela was released from prison in 1991, and in 1983, the new constitution gave South Africa the rights to vote. Mandela was elected president. So this man right here, Nelson Mandela, he was later released from prison, and then he was actually elected to be president. So that's the next guy, because he was a leader in civil rights, and they arrested him for it. So then when he got released from prison, his followers decided to vote for him to become president. All right, so looking back at number 10 right here, it asks us to highlight the names of two African presidents who were once led revolutions against the right rule. So we had this guy right here, which was Robert Mugabe, okay, and then we had Nelson Mandela. All right, so those two names are the answer for number 2. Now let's look at number 11. It says, why do you think that Southern African government created apartheid, or whatever that says there? So we learned that that's word means separateness, and when we look back over here in our definitions, it means a system of laws in South Africa aimed to separating the races. So why do you think that they created that system? Well, in my opinion, I think they created that system so the whites can keep control. All right. Because there was a group of white people there from Britain and other European countries that they wanted to keep control of Africa, because Africa like I said, has a lot of open space, a lot of rainforests, a lot of natural wonders. Also, it has a lot of resources where they can make a lot of money. So they don't want to let go of that yet or at that time, they didn't want to let go of that because then they would lose a lot of money. Also, they spent a lot of money on their lands there, and they didn't want to have to give up their lands. So that's why the people of that government made that. After people like Nelson Mandela and this guy right here, Robert Mugabe, fought for civil rights and became president, they got rid of those laws, and they don't exist anymore. All right, so here... So here, I'm going to do these as extra credit, okay? So number 1 and 2, I'm just going to put their extra credit, all right? No, wait, wrong one. So you can try to answer these. I'll give you some extra points. So they're pretty simple. Like, why did the European countries meet in Germany to divide Africa? So why? Well, they wanted to divide the power. Write that in your own sentences. Why do you think that this country's new rulers named the country of Zimbabwe. So that one, why do you think that they did that? Well, you would have to read this section over here, I believe. And you should try to get the answer from there. So like I said, those are extra credit if you want to do them. I know I said we were going to do 2 packets. I'm going to stick with 1. And later on this week, I'll post the other one. Okay, that way I don't give you too much to do in one day. Okay? So if you have any questions on what's going on this week or how to do this, just send me an email and I'll get back to you on it. All right? If you have problems from last week, let me know. Also, make sure to get your work from previous weeks done and get it turned in. Some of you that signed in a little bit late or got into my class a little bit late have not done the other work from the previous week. So make sure to get that turned in also. All right. All right. Well, we'll see y'all later. Hopefully this helps out and try to get your work done, guys.